Today we're fortunate in the Ask Your Doctor program to have one of our own people as guest speaker. And Reverend Gene Wetzel has had extensive experience in social service and in the spiritual aspects of handling older people, and particularly those who have had some memory problems. And so he's going to give us a talk today about social and spiritual aspects of Alzheimer's disease. Okay. That's
I'm going to move this aside and pull this up here a little bit. And if that doesn't suit you,
you want a regular chair?
Pardon me?
You want a regular chair?
No, I'd rather sit on a stool. I think I can see you better. Maybe you can see me better. Thank you for giving me this opportunity, you and your committee. Pardon me? Are you telling me you can't hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody can't hear me at any time during this, raise your hand and I'll elevate. I am a board certified clinical chaplain with the Association of Professional Chaplains. I did my clinical training, had a residency in the Mayo Clinic hospitals in Rochester, Minnesota, and I have a Doctor of Ministry degree in aging and long-term care, like this. That's all in addition to my original training of college and seminary for the ordained ministry in the United Church of Christ, not the United Church of Christ, which is a merger of the Congregational Christian churches and the Evangelical and Reformed Church in 1957. So that's a brief background of me. And I got a packet of materials here I intend to go through in half an hour. So we're going to hit the high spots. And you can take it home with you and read it thoroughly and ask me any questions anytime. Starting out, I thought this was a good one about Blondie, Dagwood and Blondie. Mr. Dithers was staying the night with Blondie and Dagwood. He's the boss of Dagwood. And Mr. Dithers says at breakfast, "Thanks for letting me sleep at your house last night." And Dagwood, "Anytime, boss." And as they leave for work, Mr. Dithers kisses Blondie, smack. "Goodbye, dear." And look at Dagwood. He's shocked, you know. And Mr. Dithers is driving to work and look at Dagwood looking out the window. And Mr. Dithers says, "Oh, stop pouting, will you? I told you I thought I was at my house." And here's another one. "I am lost. I have gone to find myself. If I return before I get back, please tell me to wait. Thank you." Okay, that's an introduction. Spirituality with persons suffering from dementia on page 3. The Greeks divided this up into 3 parts: a body, mind, and spirit, and that came from Plato. The Hebrews in the Old Testament were holistic. They dealt with the whole of a person. We're one. And Gerald May, a psychiatrist, talked about the psychodynamics of spirituality. Spirituality means our relationship with the divine. Roman numeral number 2 there, what kind of person are we dealing with when they are suffering with dementia. Physically, psychosocially, and spiritually. And when we're talking about spiritual, we're talking about life meaning. You know, when we ask the question, why am I here? We're dealing with life meaning. Okay, let's go on to the next page, number 4. And these are biblical words describing the person. They're translated here from the Hebrew to the Greek to the English. In the Hebrew, nephesh. In the Greek, nous. In the English, the translation is self. In the Hebrew, basar. In the Greek, sarx. And in the English, concrete manifestation. What's a concrete manifestation? I am a concrete manifestation. I have a pause. Okay. And ruach. You got to cough that word up, you know. Ruach. That's the Hebrew. And the Greek translation of that is pneuma. And the English translation is spirit, or the principle of life, the breath of life. And in the first book of Genesis, in the first two chapters of Genesis, God breathed in the breath of life in the individual. And so, on page 5, I tried to, Wilma drew this up for me. If you notice this, you can't find any ending to it. It keeps going around and around and around. And here you have the psychological, emotional, and here you have the mental cognition, the mind. Down here we have the physical body, and over here the social relationships. And in the middle is the individual management of this. And up here is spirit. We are a spirit. And when we say we are a spirit, we are a whole being. And a whole, a lot of times they spell it W-H-O-L-I-S-T-I-C, holistic. But looking it up in the dictionary, they refer you to holistic, H-O-L-I-S-T-I-C. So it can be spelled either way. And down here is life meaning. So it's, we are one. That's what that graph is all about there. That's a holistic approach to life. Let me see. Did I skip one here? 6. That's 5. We're on 6. Okay, let's get down through 6. The brain, there's a brain stem. All this will be illustrated in a little bit. There's the brain stem, the midbrain, and the cerebral cortex. And there's the brain drain. By age 60, anybody here less than age 60? Okay. By age 60, millions of nerve cells have died and memory begins to fail. Remember, the brain contains billions of nerve cells. The main problem with memory in normal aging, the memory has slowed down. Have you noticed that? I have. Minimal mental impairment is involved. The person enjoys good health. In dementia, memory loss. Some illustrations of memory loss that can be corrected. Memory loss as a result of the following. Depression. Depression, clinical depression. All of us get feeling kind of down sometimes, but we don't stay there. But clinical depression mimics Alzheimer's disease. Another thing that can cause memory loss is medication. And we had, for 14 years, I was the clinical chaplain in Fairhaven community, they called it. in Upper Sandusky, Ohio. And we had a doctor, when a person was having trouble with memory, they'd take them off all medication. And then they, after about 3 days off, they start feeding him back one at a time to see which one was causing the difficulty. Not eating or inadequate diet. We'd have people coming in to our facility at 83 years old, and they had dementia, and they'd eat their 3 meals a day, and after 2 or 3 weeks, why, their memory would come back. Some health problems contributing to memory loss can be treated. Heart disease, vascular disease, hypothyroidism, hyperthyroidism, diabetes mellitus, and hypertension. And then there's the functional, as in grief over loss. And I've noticed here, when a person loses a spouse or a close friend, people surround them and they keep relating. And that's important, because if a person, after experiencing a significant loss, becomes a recluse, that's dangerous. And we'll find out later why that's dangerous. Some memory loss that cannot be corrected. Organic disease, as in Alzheimer's and related disorders. Accident with brain damage, and boxers and professional football players are at risk as others who, and also older people, when you fall and bounce your head off the floor or something like that, that's dangerous to the memory. So an accident with brain damage, and then brain surgery resulting in brain damage. Description of memory. There's short-term memory, lasts for 7 seconds, and long-term memory, which is we have by rehearsal, and we'll talk about that more. There's recent memory, which is fluid intelligence, that have to do with activities of daily living, and this tends to suffer the most in dementia. And then there's remote memory, which is crystalline intelligence, information that has taken form and shape, information learned at school, information learned through experience. When recent memory is lost, then remote memory can begin to slowly deteriorate, and that's true in Alzheimer's. Okay, the next one on page 7 deals with the cerebral cortex, and there's the 5 lobes. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. If you go on to A, the location of the 3 main parts of the human brain, there's the brain stem, the pons is at the top, and there's autonomous things that happen like breathing and heartbeat, that are located in the pons, and then sitting on top of that is the limbic system, and that we'll be spending some more time on the limbic system. On top is the cerebral cortex, which makes us human, and there's a gray matter over the surface of that. Okay, I might tell you, I was interested in the brain and dementia because of the people I worked with. We had 180 people in assisted living. We had some in independent living too, about 40. But we had 180 people in assisted living and in skilled nursing care. So we had quite a number of people, and I had groups that I worked with them. And we also, while I was there, developed a what we call a special care unit, which was for people who had dementia. Most of them had Alzheimer's. Okay, this is my favorite, number 9. Number 1, my wife looked at it and said, that's scary. This is a drawing. This is not an actual brain, but it's given to illustrate the limbic system, which sits on top of the pons of the brainstem, to illustrate, and this is where memory initiates. So if you look here, down here, you see it says the hippocampal system right here. And that figures very heavily in short-term memory and establishing long-term memory, and we'll illustrate that more. You see this right here? This is the amygdala. Did you ever laugh? You're into the amygdala when you laugh. You ever get angry? You're into the amygdala. You're into your feelings, you see. And the thing about Alzheimer's disease, the first thing to go is reasoning. And, but the feelings remain. So when we're relating to people with dementia, we're relating to them on the feeling level. And if you try to be reasoning with them, your good doctor shaking his head no, and I agree with him 100%. I mean, you get nowhere because that's gone. My mother had Alzheimer's disease, and after she died, we had an autopsy done, and the report came back that she did not have a hippocampus right here. Now, she wasn't like that all her life. She had lost it. She was a country school teacher before she married my dad, and after he died, she became a life underwriter for Prudential Life Insurance Company. In fact, she was the first woman that they hired, and she was very successful in that. So the thing about Alzheimer's is, and this hippocampal system is very fragile. And so for that reason, if we don't use it or lose it, you know, if we don't keep using our mind, and the DACA machine is a good one. Games on the computer are a good one. Doing research, continuing to give medical talks, reading, all those things keep your mind active. You know, if we like to sit in front of the television for 12 hours a day, you're at risk for dementia. And by the way, by the time people reach 85, anybody younger than 85 here? Okay, this applies to people 85 and older. It applies to my wife and I. 47% of the people have Alzheimer's disease. 85 and older. We are at risk. So that's the important part of keeping active with your mind. Serve on committees. Socialize. Okay. Okay. And here, let me see. The thalamus is in here. That figures in memory. See these two balls out here? Yeah. Right here?
The eyeballs?
Yeah. You know what those are for? Smells. Okay, that's enough time on that. Okay, now on page 10. Okay, this explains rehearsal. This illustration of the brain here not only gives the different parts of the cerebral cortex, but it tells what they do. Now, I'm not going to go through that now, but this one paragraph right above that, over here, I'm going to read that because it explains rehearsal and how we store information into the brain. But to say that each memory has a single content slot in the brain is simplistic. The brain is a very complex organ. Each memory can be stored in several places because it can be broken down into several kinds of content. The words of the Star-Spangled Banner might be stored in the left temporal lobe, which processes language. But the melody might be stored somewhere else, possibly in the left parietal lobe, which processes auditory patterns. And each memory is connected to many related memories. For instance, if you associate Star-Spangled Banner with the image of the American flag, that memory might be stored in your occipital lobe, which possesses visual information. Your memories are thus intricately and so forth. Okay, let's go on to number 11, and this is a simplified and enlarged drawing of a neuron. Neurons are very small in the brain, but they make up our what we are up here, and it controls everything we do in our body. So here's a neuron. You have your nucleus here, and here you have your this is the axon here, and there's myelin sheath around here. They're still experimenting with medications, and they're having difficulty with it. And both Eli Lilly and Pfizer have been experimenting, continue to experiment on some of the things that the plaques and tangles in the brain, which we'll talk about more. And I've read recently that they're starting to study the myelin sheath. But Pfizer was into, I think, second or third trial on a medication here recently, and it was unsuccessful, and they're not pursuing it anymore. Eli Lilly found out, even though theirs was not successful, that with people just beginning in Alzheimer's disease, it did show improvement of slowing down the process. So they are continuing to put money into that, into trials. And that's on the plaques and tangles. Anyway, getting back to the neuron here, here's the main body of the neuron with the nucleus, the axons here. These are dendrites, and they're longer than that. They stretch out. And here are the terminal buttons down here on the other end. And here is a terminal button relaying a message to the next dendrite on another neuron. And the process is electrochemical. So when this particular terminal button puts some of its chemicals, and in Alzheimer's disease, what we're dealing with is acetylcholine. And it's a brain transmitter. They call them transmitters. And so it puts some of this down on the next one, and when it puts that chemical or that transmitter down on the next dendrite, it shoots an electrical charge down through that next axon, next neuron, down through its axon, and then it in turn sends a transmitted message to the next one. So when you get a picture of all this, they're all overlapped and so on and twisted around, but they develop pathways as we memorize, and we'll get into that more too. Moving on to 12. Now I showed you a neuron, but look at these neurons in the hippocampus. They differ somewhat than what I just showed you. and it illustrates there. It doesn't have as long an axon, but it's got these long dendrites, and then on the dendrites, there are your terminal buttons. And so it's quite complex, and it illustrates how it's communicating with the acetylcholine. Okay, going on to the next one, 13. Yeah, I missed that. Okay, we'll go on to 14. Sorry about that.
Oh, you were superstitious.
Well, I got somebody to put these off for me, and that I went through it, and so I goofed on that one. There was another one missing, and I put it up. Okay, forgetting what's normal. Brain cortex, cerebral cortex, and this is an illustration of what I was just talking about, how these terminal buttons are leaning against the dendrites of one of the other neurons, and they're in the process of communicating. And down here in the lower corner is another illustration of the transmitter being referred to the next dendrite. Here's the terminal button, and here's the dendrite. Okay, moving on. We didn't think that once the hippocampus was starting to deteriorate, that any of the cells could be restored. But here's an article that says, hey, we found some new cells in the hippocampus. Then you read this more carefully. Listen to this. The research isn't conclusive. Gage and others, Gage is one of the research scientists, Gage and others plan to study more animal brains to find the chemical or genetic signals that tell neurons to reproduce or stop growing. He cautions that the work has just begun. We don't know if these cells are functioning, he says. Hey, here's some new cells, but maybe they're not working. We still don't know if these cells are wired up correctly. And we have to figure out why this is happening. When scientists find the answers to these questions, perhaps decades from now, they may finally unlock the secrets that could heal the brain. Okay, going up to 16, this is my creation, and I still need to work on this because there's a mistake on it. But this is the memory at work. And here's the, there's three primary functions in the brain that deal with memory. There's sensory selection, there's short-term memory, and there's long-term memory. And then this shows up here on top, the sensory selection is temporal lobe, and it shows what part of the brain that is being activated, the thalamus and the hippocampus, and that's an electrical process. And now, here's all these environmental stimulus. Say you're in the dining room, and you hear all that noise in the background, but you're not paying any attention to it. And then somebody over at the next table mentions your name. Hey! that goes into the sensory selection. You don't discard that one. So if it's discarded, it's what they call decay. Okay, then it says selection or tuning out. So we tune out a lot of stuff and keep some of it. It's a big world out there. And then this is what we call encoding. And encoding, it goes into the short-term memory, and up here it says that's in the frontal lobe. The hypothalamus is the quarterback in the brain. And the thalamus and the septum are very much involved at this time, and that's an electrical process. That's short-term memory, and it's a working memory. Over here, it says to put something in long-term memory, you have to rehearse it 4 times. Where it says 4 times rehearsing, that should be over here, around short-term memory. So, how do you memorize something? You say, hello, Mr. Jones, a new acquaintance, you know. Where are you from? What kind of work did you do, Mr. Jones? What do you like to do, Mr. Jones? You keep rehearsing that name, and you finally get it, you know. Some people I hear say, well, can't remember names. Well, rehearsing is part of remembering names. Okay, and then, and if it's not rehearsed, then it decays, okay? And then you go on over here to the long-term memory, and that's in the temporal lobe, right here in the front of our brain. And the hippocampus is very active, and this is a chemical process. And here it says long-term memory, recognition for novelty and change, and the arrow points down here for consolidation. You know, that's a process where getting it locked into our brain. Referenced as in library shelves for recall. And sometimes it takes a little while to recall. But, okay. I put a lot of work into that. I see I still need to put some work in it. And you can see here is another graph of it on the next page, 17. And let me see. We've discussed most of that. The thing that I'd like to bring out there is the sensory selection is 4 milliseconds. So that's very brief. And then there's encoding, and short-term memory is 12 to 28 seconds. So if you're introduced to somebody and you get their name once, in 20 seconds you're going to lose that name unless it's rehearsed. Okay, and I think we've talked sufficiently about long-term memory. And here is the correction. I put this in here because this is the correction that I said that I made a mistake on. It talks about rehearsing in the short-term memory in order to put information into long-term memory. That's another graph that belongs to somebody else. It's copyrighted. Okay, and here is another graph that I'm not going to spend a lot of time on, maybe a little bit. It says figure 8 right here. And on the top, it talks about sensory selection. And here's attention, and then novelty, and goes into STM, short-term memory, into long-term memory, and so on. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. But the interesting thing about this, down below here is another graph, and in each stage, it shows what part of the brain is working to achieve this. Okay? I'm not going to spend any more time on that. Number 20. Alzheimer's disease attacks nerve cells, neurons, in several areas of the brain. And down on the bottom here, in this little square, this is the limbic system here in the top here, right here. And here it is showing how Alzheimer's works. Here's some plaques up here, and here's a nerve cell, and it shows tangles inside. Moving on to page 20, you get a big, this is a, 21. This is a drawing to illustrate just what we talked about. And you can see the plaques up here. And what the plaques do is they interfere with transmission between neurons, brain nerve cells. And as it interferes, then these nerve cells do not function, they die. And then here's an illustration that I'm drawing down here of how the tangles work in around the nucleus of the neuron. Over here is a healthy neuron, normal neuron, and this is one here with Alzheimer's. The interesting thing about this, all of us have plaques and tangles, but we don't have as many as people with Alzheimer's. And we have minimal number of them. They have voluminous, enormous number of them. And okay, going on. Here's a PET scan on page 22, and it shows here's the activity of a normal brain in its thinking, and look what's happening in the Alzheimer's. There's not as much activity going on. It's the light sections that show activity, and you don't see as much activity in the Alzheimer's. Okay, 6 gene alleles that make Alzheimer's susceptible. I'm running out of time. They're all listed there, and the one that's the one to really worry about is the APOE4. And if you get one of these genes from both your father and your mother, you're more at risk. I got this from a psychologist who did a workshop in Temecula several years ago. He's a PhD, and they're doing research on this, so that's from him. If you have, so when they say 4-4, they're talking about each parent. So if you have a 4-4, that means you got that particular A polyprotein E from both parents. If you have a 3-4, then one parent didn't give you the 4, and that's more moderate. 2-2 is less risk. A 2-3 is low risk, and a 3-3 is low risk. And head trauma, repeated head trauma is a high risk. And I think of professional football players who had to retire because of repeated concussions, as I understand. It takes 6 weeks to recover from a concussion. If you're a quarterback and you have a concussion, are they going to be able to keep you out for 6 weeks? You're out for 2 weeks maybe, and you're back in there, and you're not healed up yet. You're very much at risk. Who was the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys that retired because of this? He's now one of the men that helped televise professional football games. Anyway, he retired, and there was a quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers that had to retire for the same reason. He had about 6 concussions. I think his last name was Young. Okay, number 24, memory lapse is not, is it normal aging or something more serious? That's a good graph, and that shows where it's from, down there in the bottom. Normal age-related forgetfulness sometimes misplaces keys, eyeglasses, or other items. Mild cognitive impairment frequently misplaces items. Dementia forgets what an item is used for or puts it in an inappropriate place. Okay, and you can go down through that on your own. But if someone misplaces their car keys, that's one thing. But if they happen to see the car keys and they say, "What are these for?" you're in trouble. Okay? And my mother, after my stepfather died, she insisted on staying alone. She didn't stay alone forever. Eventually we got her into a long-term care home like this, back in Pennsylvania. But she couldn't back her car out on the street because that was in Pennsylvania and there was a driveway alongside the house, a drop-off. And so she got one of the neighbor boys of a girl who was a classmate of mine in school. She got her son to back her car out in the street. And then she said to the guy, to the young fellow, "Where's the brake?" And my classmate called me up right away and told me about it. And of course then my brother and I had to get on my mother and say we didn't want to drive her anymore. Didn't want her to drive anymore. Well, why? I could drive good, you know, all that. We had to go through that. Okay, stages of symptom progression in Alzheimer's disease. Well, there's first stage, 2 to 4 years, leading up to and including diagnosis. Symptoms, recent memory loss begins to affect job performance. I'm just going to hit the high spots in this. You can read this more carefully later. Examples: forgets which bills are paid or which phone numbers are called frequently. Second stage, 2 to 10 years after diagnosis. Longer stage, symptoms: increasing memory loss and confusion, shorter attention span. Examples: can't remember, this is on page 26. Examples: can't remember visits immediately after visitor has left. That was, I go and visit my mother in the retirement home, and I'd say, "Oh, I forgot something out in the car, I'll be right back." And so I go out and get it, and run and come back in. "Where have you been? I haven't seen you for months." And I was there 5 minutes ago. So when you don't have a hippocampus, you don't put in any new information in your brain. Okay, the terminal stage is, and Alzheimer's is a terminal disease. Is 1 to 3 years. Symptoms: can't recognize family or self in the mirror. Example: looks in mirror and talks to own image. And then on page 27, that's, I attended a seminar in Cincinnati, Ohio, and there was this psychiatrist by the name of Barry Reesberg, MD, who gave us 7 stages. I'll just read the last one. Stage 7, very severe Alzheimer's disease, progressive cognitive impairment, speech limited to 6 or fewer words. This is often when family comes for help. And this breaks families' hearts when their family member no longer recognizes them. It hurts. It's a loss. It's grief. Significant grief. Okay. Bladder and bowel incontinence begin because they forget to know what to do. Research shows 100% are institutionalized or deceased within 4 years. It takes approximately 5 years for a person to go from stage 5 to incontinence in stage 6. I'm reading the wrong one, sorry. Stage 7, very severe Alzheimer's disease, progressive cognitive impairment, speech limited to 6 or fewer words. This is often when family comes for help. Ambulatory ability lost, a family observation, ability to smile lost. We learned this at 2 months of age. Eventually falls into stupor and coma. Finally, death occurs. And the next chart on page 28, we're almost finished, and I'm not getting it done. I had 45 minutes at most. But this is a chart that Wilma drew up for me, and I'll just talk briefly about it. It shows the progression of a child at birth and how they learn, and then when they get dementia, how the losses occur. And it mirrors, if you compare the two, the growth here and the losses here mirror each other. And what was learned last is lost first. Okay? Okay, moving on. Present symptoms in Alzheimer's disease. What are the presenting symptoms in Alzheimer's disease? Although Alzheimer's disease produces devastating cognitive loss, not all of the patient's abilities are impaired. Caregivers and care providers should select tasks that emphasize the AD patient's preserved skills. Impaired abilities, and there they are: judgment, abstract thinking, attention, organization, perception, memory, learning, language. And then the preserved abilities in Alzheimer's disease are perseveration. I'm sorry, I can't explain that one. Emotions, habitual behavior, sensory function, social skills, motor function, remote memory. So when we're working with people who have Alzheimer's disease, we emphasize what's over here in the preserved abilities and not try to relate to them over here on the left, which has been lost. Okay? Okay, number 30, working with people experiencing memory loss. I'm not going to talk about listening skills and loss and grief. You can look at that, except I'll mention about grief. There's a woman who wrote a book on ambiguous grief. And that very often is what family members experience with Alzheimer's. Caregivers and family members are continually in grief with a loved one who has Alzheimer's disease because they're watching continuous loss, and as there's each loss, there's grief in that. And so it's continuous grief with the family. I speak personal about that. And what worked in my profession with residents in the long-term care facility never worked with my mother because I was emotionally involved. And I wasn't that emotionally involved. Although I loved the people, that I could work with them more successfully than I did with my mother. Okay, how to deal with the agitated resident and not just hitting high spots. There's a book written by 36-Hour Day by Robert Mace from John Hopkins. And there's a whole book on this. Keep control of your own feelings. Validate the feelings of the resident. Distract the resident from what they are doing with the suggestion of doing something else that is more calming. Calmly take them by the hand or arm and gently lead them to the calming distraction. So page 31. Okay, this is a system that I developed. I wrote the clinical program for our special care unit that we developed while I was there. And we worked on it for 6 years. We had to work with administration because we had to sell them on the idea. And how much are you going to charge for people to be in there? And so they ended up charging, between assisted living and skilled nursing. And we had 24 beds. The first, and it was divided into 2 parts. And the first 12 were people who were in a more beginning stage of the disease, and the other 12 beds, and they gave us a wing. The other 12 beds were people who more progressed in the disease. Okay. Reality orientation deals with recent memory, forgetfulness, disorientation, time, place, person. You look at your watch. Wow. Reality orientation. You look at a calendar, reality orientation. Reminiscing, talking about things you did in the past. Validation fantasy therapy, centering in on feelings, understanding the symbols in which the person is speaking. I'll give you one brief illustration. In one of my groups, we would talk about what was important in their life, do some reality orientation. But this one woman kept breaking out, Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. We'd all sing with her, and then we'd start talking again. First thing you know, she's singing it again. We'd all sing with her. And this kept going on. I said, hey, she's trying to tell us something. What do you think she was trying to tell us? Anybody have any ideas? On feeling level now.
She has to go to the bathroom.
Bathroom? Okay, I dealt with it this way. I said, so I was dealing with it on the rational area. I said, in there, it said these words, we are weak, but he is strong. Do you believe that? Oh, that don't mean nothing. My mother taught me that. So I related to her on the feeling, oh, that means that you're loved and you feel comfortable. But yeah, that's it, you got it. So that's dealing, that's figuring out the fantasy and dealing with it on the feeling level. Okay. Remotivation. The more we get together, the more we get together, the happier we'll be. For your friends are my friends, and my friends are your friends. The more we get together, the happier we'll be. You get people singing and talking, you remotivate them, reactivate them. And in skill, when people got out of the...
Works for me. It works for me.
When people got out of the, progressed to the point that we couldn't help them in the skilled nursing facility, they ended up in in the Alzheimer's unit. Then they went to skilled nursing. So, but I still had groups up there, and the nurses would talk about, well, that person, we couldn't wake them up, they were just sleeping all day, you know. And so we'd bring them down in my group, and we'd sing like that, and start talking, you know, and what season is it? You know, they haven't been outside. They look out the window, you know. Oh, is it summer? Try again. And finally somebody would say, oh, hey, it looks like winter. There's snow out there. Okay, so that was activating them. And here's another story. I was visiting with a gentleman one day, and I was doing some reality orientation with him, and he got angry. And I said, I see this as making you angry, so I was validating the feeling. I see this as making you angry. I said, let's talk about something else. I said, what kind of work did you do? You know, and we talked about that for a while. Tell me about your family. You know, he did a great job on reminiscing. So we kept this fluid, you know, like, you know, the old car with the gear shift. We kept shifting gears and whatever was working with the individual. Okay. And let me see, page 32. Sorry, it took me longer to get through this than I thought it would. But why is there Alzheimer's? Why does God let it happen? And I just have one thing to mention. You ever read Rabbi Kushner's book on when bad things happen to good people? He had a son who had progeria. You know what progeria is? It's fast aging. So when the boy was about 18 years old, he looked like me. He had wrinkled skin, and he was bald-headed, and he had lost his teeth. I still got mine. I have good dentistry. But he had this fast aging, and they couldn't stop it. And he died an early death. And the thing that Rabbi Kushner said, you know, what's the meaning of something like this, an experience like this? And we can apply this to Alzheimer's. He said, there is meaning in it, even though we don't know what the meaning is. Okay, moving on. Biblical passages. Genesis 1:26 and 27. Then God said, let us make humankind in our image, according to our likeness. So God created humankind in his image. In the image of God he created them. Male and female he created them. Now, applying this to memory. In Genesis 8:1, God remembered Noah. Genesis 19:29, God remembered Abraham. And Genesis 30:22, then God remembered Rachel. She was barren. And God remembered her, and her womb was open. And she had a baby, and his name was Joseph. Okay. As the condition of Alzheimer's progresses in a person, they eventually forget God. However, God does not forget them. God continues to remember them as God has always remembered God's people. God loves them. They are recipients of God's grace. Thank you for listening. And I did get a